And so I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves and their name and where they're from and what has brought them to the Unite movement.
Start with me?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So my name's Chris Vance. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Well, Auburn, Washington, about 15 miles south of Seattle. I spent 2 terms in the Washington State House of Representatives, 2 terms on the King County Council. For 5 years, I was the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. I was the Republican nominee for the United States Senate in 2016, and I'm no longer a Republican. I started looking for something different, as so many of us have. Happened upon the Centrist Project. Joel Searby and Nick persuaded me to come. They've been saying this is a first-of-a-kind meeting, but there was another meeting about a year ago in Philadelphia. About 50 of us were there, so this is growing exponentially. And I went to that meeting, was very inspired, and said, I need to go home and create a Washington State affiliate. And I did. I went back and recruited a board, started a political action committee called Washington Independence, was very lucky to persuade a 6-term former Democratic member of Congress, Brian Baird, to be my co-chair. And we are supporting and helping independent candidates in Washington State in the same ways that Unite America is helping at the national level. And we are an affiliate of Unite America, and it's a great partnership.
I'm Nicole Rowlette. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm a political layperson. I have a day job. That's not politics. But I'm the kind of person who has to go out and get signatures, that kind of thing. I'll begin at the beginning. I was born in 1989. And one of my first memories, Bush-Clinton race, I think I was 3 years old. So in my mind, it was they were swinging across a chasm on a rope in a race. But I knew who we liked and who we didn't like in my family. And that never bothered me a whole bunch, even as I did clash with my people, as a teenager and a college student. But in 2016, I realized that my party had left me, and there wasn't much I could do about it from the inside. So I looked around for other options and didn't find anything that seemed viable and could produce a large coalition until I stumbled upon a magazine article, Fortune magazine, Catherine Gell and Michael Porter, about the duopoly, and it mentioned the Fulcrum strategy, and I thought that sounded like something that could happen, and I wanted to be a part of it.
My name is Bob Perls. I'm a former New Mexico state representative, and I think about the commonality of my experiences and what led me here are largely a set of experiences of startup organizations. I founded a medical technology company when I was 24. Then I ran for the state legislature and had a great staff within my medical technology company who supported me. Campaigns, as you know, are very much startup organizations. I've served a couple of terms in the New Mexico State House, then ran for Congress, all as a Democrat. Congressional campaign definitely felt like a startup. That was unsuccessful. I realized now that I was really an independent in Democrats' clothing all along. I won 3 straight Democratic primaries where my own Speaker of the House ran somebody against me 3 straight elections, and I beat them. And that informed, I think, my later in life political opinion, because this was back 20, 25 years ago when I was in my 30s. I co-founded a charter school with 3 other people that is now 15 years later still up and going. Ran for another statewide office in 2004, still as a Democrat, because stupid me, I hadn't learned my lesson. Sold my technology company in 2008, worked on a couple of startups in 2009 that didn't get funded, and decided I really wanted to do public service. So I joined the State Department, went through the Foreign Service Officer application process, which is arduous, and served my country, our country, in Germany, West Africa, Canada, and my final overseas assignment was Islamabad, Pakistan. So because of elder care reasons, I came back in 2015 after having served with the State Department for 5.5 years and realized I had spent 5 years talking about American democracy and why America is the beacon of democracy throughout the world, and is the American dream different than the Pakistani dream or the German dream or the Canadian dream. And I looked around at my own home state of New Mexico, looked around my country, and realized, man, we are really dysfunctional. And even though we're the beacon of democracy, there's so much we can do. We can be so much better than we are. And so I set up New Mexico Open Primaries 3.5 years ago to focus on structural process issues. We were fairly successful on some advocacy fronts. We thought we needed to get into some strategic lawsuits to blow open a closed primary system in New Mexico and very discriminatory ballot access issues. And then about 9 months ago, when I was thinking about running for Congress as an independent in the 2018 election cycle, I reached out to Unite America, talked to Nick, thought deeply about that, and decided we didn't have the infrastructure in place in New Mexico to run as an independent candidate, and felt like, no, let's set up a chapter in New Mexico for Unite America, spend 2 years building that infrastructure, and then hopefully in 2020, whether I run or just help another dozen great candidates run, we'll have what we need to move forward.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lena Eng, and I am one of the co-chapter leaders for Milwaukee. Basically, unlike my neighbor here, prior to just 4 months ago, I was the typical passive voter. I would Google the candidate profiles about 2 hours before I headed to the voting booth. And that is basically what I did for decades, until about 2016, when, of course, like many of us, we were really disheartened by what was happening. And I realized that our political system is broken, and it was unable to fix any of the problems that it had the power to do. And so that's when both my husband and I decided we needed to be part of the solution, or at least try. And so for the last 4 months, we have attended numerous political and networking events. We have basically educated ourselves about politics because we knew nothing. And it's been amazing. We've done canvassing, we have phone banked, we have hosted engaging activities to try and build our base. And currently we have about 20 people who we feel are serious about and very passionate about helping out at some level. And so we do feel like we are still in the pre-launch stage, and so we're going to spend the next few months fine-tuning our strategy, and we hope to hit the ground running in Q4.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To kick off the conversation, I want to talk about an idea that Charlie talks a lot about, which is that we need an insurgency of the rational, of the middle. And one of the things that we think about sometimes is one of the challenges with moderates is that they tend to be moderate. And so one question is, how does the movement get as exciting as the resistance has on the left or the Tea Party movement has on the right? Like, what is it, based on your experiences or your thoughts, that we have to do to create something that is as engaging as those movements have become?
So I don't know if we are ever going to be to the point where people are going to riot in the streets. But our core message of country over party, the system is broken, both political parties are insane, electing one more Republican or one more Democrat's not going to change anything, is incredibly powerful. We've polled it both in Washington State and around the country, and that message moves voters. We need to say it with anger and passion. I'm here because I am fed up with everything that's happening in this country and scared to death of the future of my country that my kids are going to inherit. Angry enough, to fly all the way out here from Seattle. And we have to repeat our core message with vigor and anger. And that is what's going to make us interesting, is we're not boring little meek little moderates. We're fed up and not going to put up with this crap anymore. And that's how we have to frame this message. That's how we're going to make the movement interesting.
I agree with that. I think some of the we'll need staying power also. And some of the things that I've seen from my background as a Republican and evangelical, what they've been building for decades. They have true belief and they have a community. And you really can't have one without the other. We're never going to be like a world religion, but we do need to talk about the values that we have, our Declaration of Independence, and have that ongoing adult education. And then the community part, we have to foster a feeling of family, I think. When you come to your local chapter meeting, being happy to meet, to see people that where everyone knows your name, that kind of thing, and be in it for the long haul.
And I'll say that notion of just knowing who the other people are, part of the movement, is really important. There's lots of our local chapters out there serve that purpose, which is that we have 25, 30,000 people who are supporting United America, and those local chapters are really about just connecting the people, and it's the relationships, as we're finding this weekend, that propel this thing forward. So I think that's really right. Bob?
I think the key is fairness. When you talk about fairness with people, they get it. The current system isn't fair. It's not fair to the middle class. It's not fair to all the people who are disenfranchised. And since we're talking about local chapters, I think it's different from state to state. In New Mexico, my home state, we have closed primaries. We have deeply gerrymandered districts. We have some of the highest ballot access, unfair ballot access requirements in the nation. We have had court cases go against us that seem totally unfair. And so part of the way that we've recruited independent candidates to run, part of the way that I've recruited a very diverse board to serve, is to talk about these process issues and to let these process issues bring this very diverse coalition of people together. So to support open primaries, to support ranked choice voting, to support nonpartisan districting commissions. In states where these reforms already exist, that won't work. But for New Mexico, the thesis that the political system is fundamentally unfair, that it is fundamentally rigged, but we define what rigging means. It doesn't mean that there's voter fraud. It means that it's rigged in that as an independent candidate, you can't get on the ballot. As an independent voter, you can't vote in a public election. And so rationality, as you mentioned, Tyler, and fairness tie together, but that's not the same as in the middle. It's not the same as centrism. I'm a big believer that it was good to change the branding because centrism doesn't resonate with a lot of people. To a lot of people, they hear centrism and they think watered down. In a liberal district, we need an independent that's liberal. In a conservative district, in a rural district, we need an independent that's more conservative. But that fairness and the rationality pitch, that flies, that works, but how you blend it and brand it is different based on what state you're in.
Yeah, I would say for where I am in Wisconsin, it has been a privilege for me because we don't have any independent candidates currently, I've been able to help the campaign for an independent candidate for running for governor who decided to run on the Democratic ticket. And it was exciting. He had incredible passion. His background, he'd spent decades being the watchdog, and so very fiscally conservative, and really brought transparency to Wisconsin. He was able to garner, even though he did not win in the primary, which was just last week, he was able to get 93,000 in an email list. And I do feel like that will be, as Bob pointed out, someone who we are going to work with to open up with the electoral reform. So I think the alliances, it's great being independent because we do want to work with Democrats and Republicans. The difference is that we should focus on process, so that even though I might be pro-life, I am not on a personal level, my focus is let's just figure out how we can reduce the number of abortions. And that is something that I think both sides would want to accomplish.
Awesome. Well, for Lena and Nicole, I want to ask, what is it that you're doing as a local organizer? What are the tactics that you're using that you're finding are actually engaging people and inspiring them to take action, whether it be to write a letter to the editor, to step up and run for office, to come to a chapter meeting? What are the things that you're doing that you've found are successful in helping your chapters grow? Partly because, Lena, you built such a great chapter in such a short amount of time, and Nicole, because you've been able to organize so many chapters all across the Midwest. So really curious, like, what it is, the tactics that you're finding that you think are really impactful and to inspiring people to action.
One of the most important things I've found to get people to keep coming is to call them one-on-one and ask to go to coffee. And that is not very scalable. It takes time. It takes us volunteers spending that time to do it. But they will not answer an email that goes out to 15 people, 20 people. They need the one-on-one interaction. That's the biggest thing with me. But it's hard to get people to do those things that really matter, like knocking doors, making voter contacts. They don't feel comfortable with it. Modeling what you want them to do, bringing them along, definitely helps with that.
Okay, I guess I would say we've only had 4 chapter meetings, and we've had different people attending each, yet I feel like what Nicole was saying is so true. To engage somebody who has shown a little bit of interest with that extra follow-up call, with that meeting for coffee or for lunch, that has gone a significant way in terms of helping them to feel like this is a movement where they can actually become part of a community. And so we might be capable. My husband is an executive, so he's done a lot of strategy, and he's a visionary, but he purposely wanted it to be our strategy. And so inviting them to become part of the groundbreaking of, what is it that is important. I mean, it was phenomenal, the ideas that came out of that brainstorming session. One thing that we realized was that even though we are centrally located in the Metro Milwaukee area, we realized that we needed to have a different location and rotate. And that has allowed other people to have skin in the game because now they're hosting the event at their location. It gives them an opportunity to invite their neighbors and their friends to that event. So our last event was a wine tasting event where we introduced the concept of ranked choice voting. And it was fabulous because it was very casual, but we probably engaged about 3 or 4 people at that event who are now on board. One is going to take on social media. She's like 21, so she knows what she has an in on areas that my husband and I don't do social media. So it's great to be able to get that involvement. And we have some newly retired people, so they have a little bit more time. So rotating geography has been big to get the involvement and help them to feel like they are part of the community instead of they're becoming, they have to come to us, we're going out to them.
Awesome. My question for Chris and Bob is, you've each taken a stab at starting a statewide organization. Chris, Washington Independence got started last fall, Bob, just a few months ago. Would be curious if you could each talk to, the top line successes and also some of the biggest challenges that maybe you did or didn't anticipate and how you think we go about tackling those challenges.
Yeah, and first let me describe what we did. I came home from Philadelphia and I said, I want to create, and Washington state law is very easy this way. Other states might not be so easy. a political action committee, and we have the ability to do independent expenditures for candidates, and we could do training, and we could do basically everything a political party could do. And you just have to fill out like 2 pieces of paper and you're done. But I knew I couldn't do this by myself, so I wanted to recruit a board and started reaching out to everybody I knew who was interested in centrist, third way, independent politics. Called a big meeting. Nick flew out for it in Seattle. We had about 50 people there. And at the meeting, I said, okay, you're all great people. Who here is willing to serve on our board? 10 people raised their hands, and we had a board. And again, thankfully, I had Congressman Baird as my co-chair, and we got started. And we went out trying to recruit candidates and raise money. This year, over 30 people ran for the Washington State Legislature's independence. And by the way, we have a very wide open system. All you have to do is sign a form and your name's on the ballot. And the top 2, regardless of party, move forward. So the challenge for us is getting through the top 2 primary. We ended up endorsing 3 really good candidates. We gave them all a lot of advice and helped them find consultants. One of them, we did about $5,000 worth of Facebook ads as independent expenditures. But our superstar standing in the back of the room right there, Dr. Ann Diamond from rural Washington State from the 12th District, I wish I could take credit for recruiting her. We didn't. She was already out there. We found her. But we did over $50,000 of independent expenditures to support her. We raised some of the money. A lot of it came from Unite. She spent about the same, and she beat the Democrat and made it through the top 2 primary and now has a real shot. I mean, I'd say if the election were held today, she's behind a little bit, but she is in the hunt to be the first independent ever elected in Washington State. So, you could say in one way it's disappointing that after all this work we have one candidate, but we had nothing a year ago. This didn't exist at all, and we are just getting started. My goal is to have an independent running for governor of Washington State in 2020 and a full slate of legislative candidates. Oh, a couple more things really quick. We leave the federal stuff to Unite America. We are just a state PAC. And we have a great relationship with our Seattle chapter of Unite America. They do the grassroots. They organize the volunteers. They do all the grassroots stuff while we do, Washington Independence is a PAC, we do the money and the training and the candidate support.
Yeah, my journey was a little bit different. I already talked a bit about the fact that I had founded New Mexico Open Primaries when I came back from Islamabad with the State Department. So that's a 501c4, founded in the middle of 2015. Called 20 or 30 former campaign supporters into my house. Out of that, we got 4 or 5 board members. A lot of those board members have come and gone. New ones have been added. Through our advocacy efforts, through 3 legislative sessions, more people came out of the woodworks. A lot of independents got engaged. And what we realized is that we needed a carrot and a stick in this very repressive environment, which is New Mexico. The carrot for legislators to actually work on what we were doing was that we would potentially support them, even if they're Democrats or Republicans, if they support open primaries, if they support ranked choice voting. A little bit of a stick was filing the right lawsuits, and a huge hammer was going to be starting to run independent candidates against them. And so this 501c4 morphed from a process-based issue, including some lawsuits, to the connection that I made with Nick, to opening up this New Mexico chapter with a $10,000 grant from Unite America, which was hugely transformative. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it actually makes the difference between me having to reach into my pocket and a few board members continuing to fund efforts to actually having money to, for example, launch a statewide series of town hall meetings, which my co-founder and I did. New Mexico is the 5th largest state. We held 5 town hall meetings around the state. Every single town hall touch point got free media. We got some electronic media coverage, but mostly print media, generated a lot of social media feedback. And I actually recruited a couple of really good board members just in the last few months from some of those key town hall meetings. Out of this existing board came the 2 state house independent candidates that we've endorsed. out of our network with Democrats and Republicans. It was really quite funny, and it's worth sharing, where I was at a Democratic political function just a few months ago supporting a Democratic state rep who was very supportive of open primaries, who I actually beat in my state rep race in my primary, my third primary that the leadership ran. He ran this trial lawyer against me. We've since become allies. And one of the old-time party partisans came up to me with a grin on his face when I walked into this fundraiser for the state rep saying, "Bob, I have a present for you." And I couldn't imagine what it was. He said, "I have an independent who's going to run for the county commission, and I want you to help her." And it was shocking to have a guy who opposed me as a Democrat every single time I ran to be so excited about having an independent candidate. Of course, there wasn't a Democrat in the race. And I share that with you because there's this momentum that's building, even amongst party regulars coming to me. And I was really seen quite as the Judas of the Democratic Party for a while when I announced my independent registration, that, wow, they're presenting me with candidates. They're seeing that we have a role to play in politics. And if it weren't for Unite America and their infrastructure and their support, we wouldn't be here where we are today, I think.
Awesome. Well, I want to turn it over to the audience now and open it up to any questions that are on people's minds. We'll go right here in the front.
Well, I would just like to say that I ran as an independent for a state house seat in Georgia. Now, I've been an independent all my life, and the point of this was to see how hard it was, to see what it took to actually go out and collect these signatures. It's very hard. But the first person, of course, once everyone registered, we had about 10 independents, 3 for the state senate, the rest for the house, and then a few other places. But the first person that reached out to me was Amanda Swaffer with Unite America. And she was so nice, and she was so on it, and she kept trying through the whole thing, and I kept trying through the whole thing to get all the independents together and sort of be a force. But I found the problem with independents is we're all very independent, and we work alone. And as a result, one man, Femi Odwall, he made his signature requirements plus, but he did not notarize it. There are just so many tricks, and they just leave you around. I felt like I was just jerked around by the Secretary of State the entire time. I expected it, so I kept looking into it. Amanda being a great resource, but Femi, he was alone. He was independent. He sought no help, and so now we're basically writing letters to the Secretary of State begging for him to be.
Let me jump in and just say one of the things we're doing is we've established an independent candidate resource center. And so not only have we invited our endorsed candidates, we've endorsed all the other independent candidates in New Mexico. There aren't that many. There are 11 of them, most of them at lower level municipal races. But we're holding it in a couple of weeks. We're trying to figure out all the pitfalls that exist. I mean, just one example, this county commission candidate who was presented to me as a present, nobody knew that in New Mexico, county commission candidates had to turn in signatures because Democrats and Republicans don't. At higher levels, at state rep, state senate, it's highly discriminatory, usual story, independents need 10 times the number of signatures. We didn't even know, as the advocates for independent candidates, that independent county office holder candidates need to turn in signatures. We just found out recently that in New Mexico, if you're a governor or a lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, and there's more than 2 of you, who gets to go on the general ballot? They flip a coin. That's in statute. Some craziness that has been put together, cobbled together by the partisans, by the duopoly. So setting up an independent candidate resource center now, and for 2020, we're hoping to inform ourselves, hoping to inform everybody else, so that we can run rational races in the future.
All right, I'll turn it back to the audience and just emphasize the question part. So get to a really short, quick question. We'll go to Skippy.
Yeah. Chris, this is in response to something you said, but really channeling the passion and the anger.
Mhm.
But in a previous panel, we heard someone really speaking to bringing the joy into the message,
Mhm.
which I think is healthy as a community to look forward to something. So the question is, how do you focus that anger in a joyful way?
Joyful anger.
Or do you not, and if so, why?
So I've been doing political campaigns for over 30 years. And this is no different, running as an independent. All campaigns, you have to start out with the problem. Here's the problem. The other side is doing blank. And I'm angry about that. But here's the joy. I'll fix it, and I will make everything good and wonderful, and there'll be gumdrops and unicorns. And okay, so we need to talk about how the two parties are a mess. The political system is a mess. Everything's broken. And you know what? We don't have to go very far with that because voters agree with us. And then say, but things can be better. We don't have to put up with this. We're Americans. We can do something different. We can elect independents who will go to Olympia or to Washington, D.C. or wherever and work to bring people together and solve problems and help our kids' schools and stuff. And one thing I agree with strongly is something I heard on the previous panel, which is, yes, we need to talk about process and how unfair the system is, but average moms and dads sitting around their kitchen table are far more interested in what are you going to do to make their kids' school better? What are you going to do to make their commute to work easier? We have to take stands on real kitchen table issues because some of the things we might care the most about, like how hard it is to get on the ballot, voters don't care. They care about themselves.
Awesome. We'll take one from the back.
I asked this question to the previous one. To the degree that you care about the people who aren't voting, many of whom would call themselves independents but don't show up. First of all, is that true? Is that a group you're trying to reach? If so, what have been the most successful strategies to get those people who haven't voted, partly because they're alienated and therefore could vote, but haven't?
So the question is, do we reach out to people who have never voted before, and if so, how do we engage them? And I think that's a great question for Lena and Nicole because they're the ones kind of out there talking to voters the most. So, in chatting with members and volunteers, do you come across people who have been apathetic?
Well, I do know people who haven't voted, and part of it is, a lot of it is just listening to the voters. And I do feel that if you do a good job of listening to them, there is a connection that's made. And the key, though, is to turn that into a real vote is having a system in place so that you can follow up later, which is why it's, I think, vitally important in our strategy session that we, even though we as a local chapter don't necessarily have the ability to see like open rates, to see who's really engaged, I think that's something that is important, that because you may not need their vote until 2020, but how do you stay connected, and that's very critical. So first listening, and but then the follow-up is highly important.
Yep, I would second that. One way I listen is ask lots of questions. That's how I really try to make my points, is by asking questions and really trying to figure out what's keeping them and like why they think that they don't matter. I don't know any of the strategy. There's lots of strategy I've heard about whether non-voters matter, like whether to go after millennials or to be afraid of millennials if they ever do start voting. But I don't know the answer to that question, but of course they should.
So I have no romance about this, again, because I've been doing campaigns so long. Every cycle I hear people say, we're going to get the people who aren't engaged. We're going to get the people who don't vote to vote. Guess what? You're not. Everyone thought that when we lowered the voting age to 18, kids would all vote and it would change everything. It didn't. People start voting in their 40s. And people, just the demographics we all know are the way they are. Instead, one of the biggest things is this movement, we can't be a bunch of amateur neophytes, okay? We have to be professional politicians and know how to win. You target your message at people who are gonna vote. It makes no sense to send your direct mail and your digital ads to people who don't vote. We need to target the people who do vote. And that's one of the problems, I think, with this movement is there's a lot of people who have idealism about how I'm going to change the system and stuff. No, what we're going to need to focus on is winning. Winning will change the system.
Yeah.
I'll add that the members who have come to me in my chapter have been very engaged in politics in the past. They're just disgusted with it. So I haven't seen a whole lot of people who weren't interested before.
Yeah, and I'll say that there are a lot of, I think new voters are especially open to supporting independents. We've seen a lot of polling that suggests that new voters and frustrated voters are open to supporting an independent. A lot of it is trying to convince them that it matters. And to Chris's point, it is very hard to engage those folks. And when we win, perhaps that's what will bring those people into the movement when they see that it is actually possible. Because they may not want to put in the elbow grease now, but if we can prove it's possible with the wins that Chris talks to, I think that's possible. We have time for a few more questions. We'll go right here. Yeah.
So, using the lessons learned from kind of the beginning of this movement and the 2018 campaign season, what improvements to organization and communication between our national, our state, and our local chapters would you like to see for 2020 in order to maximize our chances?
And before we answer that, that's Scott Armstrong, the leader of our Seattle chapter and a hero in this movement. So.
Thank you. So the question was, how best do we organize ourselves, and what improvements can we make in the way that Unite America works with state organizations, Unite America works with chapters, and how state organizations work with chapters?
Let me say that we're already starting to plan for 2019 and 2020, and one of the best things we can possibly do together between state chapters and Unite America is to professionalize the state chapters. I spend 20 to 30 hours a week of my volunteer time, and I'm maxed out. My board members are maxed out. And if we had full-time staff with a low six-figure budget to do all the targeting, sophisticated digital media that we need to do, and board recruitment and board training and traveling throughout a huge state, and then independent expenditures that we can help through our 501c4 deliver, that's a game changer. And if Unite America had the resources to fund 2 or 3 startups, that would be great. 50 startups in all 50 states would be even better. And another pet peeve I have is that this triumvirate of advocacy, lawsuits, and helping run independent candidates should be consolidated in all 50 states so that we don't have 30 different organizations with 20 different local chapters doing uncoordinated things. And if we could have single groups focused on all of those, pulling in expertise in all of those areas, I think we'd see results by leaps and bounds.
We have one more question right here.
Well, Scott basically asked my question, but I want to direct it a little bit differently. Other than writing a check, other than, gosh, if we all had a Chris Vance, that would be fantastic in every state.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that strikes me, just to throw it out there, is one of the things that's so hard for an independent is understanding the rules in your state and in your district, in your precinct, whatever. How do you all see that as valuable? Am I just don't know better, or are you getting a lot of questions asking for that kind of support? Because it would seem to me that something Unite could really make a difference in providing that type of expertise, and it wouldn't be big dollar.
Yeah. So I think the question is, to the folks here is, where do you go to figure out what the next step is in your state? And where can folks who are interested go to figure out what it takes to run for office, to get ranked choice voting on the ballot in their state, or what do you find?
Well, I think we have to have professionalism in our chapters and our affiliates to answer these questions for the grassroots. We've got all these people out there who want to help, but they don't want to devote their whole lives to this. They want to be told what to do, and in a good way. I mean, they want to know, here's where I send the check, here's where I go to ring doorbells, here's where the phone bank is, and I go do it. You need to have people at the top of the pyramid who understand how politics works in each of our individual states, and it's so different. I mean, the situation in Washington is so different than New Mexico. So so far, I think United America is doing a fantastic job with that. I'm really pleased with. I mean, we couldn't have gotten as far as we have without them.
Any other closing thoughts?
Let me tie in Joel Serby's comments this morning that I thought were so outstanding, the 7 or 8 leadership types. Some of the training in the State Department that I got was very specific. Don't assume that competent people are like you, or don't assume that your team that you need to build is like you. So the way we build this movement is to have strong local chapters and state organizations with boards of directors and leaders who are very diverse ethnically, diverse politically, but also diverse in what their strengths are. I'm not very good at details. I'm better at the overall vision. And so one reason I've got a pretty effective board is that we've got people not filling slots of attorneys and CPAs and business people, but filling the slots of exactly what Joel described, sort of a few visionaries and a few thinkers and a few guides. And I think that's going to be the key to building a strong movement. That may not directly answer the question, but it's all about capacity building and leadership building and having this diverse talent pool in each state to move us forward.
You allow Republicans or Democrats on your board? Yes, no. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we've made it's become our mantra that we leave political issues at the door and focus on process issues. Otherwise, it falls apart because we've got Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Greens, Independents, former Republicans, former Democrats. I think that's the only way to do it.
And our focus is actually different. Washington Independence is focused on electing people, as we put it, people who fit the political culture of Washington State, which is moderate, centrist. We won't support people, for instance, who are pro-life. Our state is very strongly pro-choice, and they're not going to compete. So our only litmus test is if you want to continue to call yourself an R or a D, great, but you're going to support centrist independent candidates.
Awesome. Well, we do have to get off to what will be an incredible lunch panel, but I wanted to share a few reflections, especially on how might you get involved in building the movement. I think one great idea that Nicole surfaced is that these things are built with coffees and lunches. So I encourage you all to, think about who are the 5 to 10 people that you're going to go back to in your hometown and say, hey, I want to get coffee and lunch with you over the next 2 weeks, and I want to tell you what happened at this summit that I went to in Denver. That's one tangible thing you can do. Dominic Scafidi, who's sitting right here, is our field and digital manager and has built what is an incredible 40-chapter-strong leadership program that 2 of our panelists are a part of. And you can talk to Dom and learn how to sign up to start a chapter in your community. You can talk to Chris and Brian and the leaders of Maine Independence and Matt Scoble, who's our Virginia political director, building out Unite Virginia for 2019, here this weekend about what it takes to build a state organization. And if you want to run for office, it's just unitedamerica.org/run, and we'll tell you exactly what it takes to run in your seat. So those are just a few ideas and directional pointing to how we can work together to build a movement. But I just want to take one final time to thank our panelists for a great discussion, and we're going to move right into lunch. Yep.